A really big issue with a lot of people, especially people who are experienced already at philanthropic giving and are interested in doing something very significant for charity, is the ongoing involvement of their extended family, their children, their grandchildren in the future, and perpetuating the family's philanthropic legacy. With the more sophisticated charitable givers, that's a very big issue. Another big issue, which is almost more of a practical issue for people that are philanthropically inclined, is how much do they need to keep for themselves, how much do they need to keep for their family, and how much can they afford to give away after taking into account the tax benefits of making these gifts. One of the most important issues is to be sure you get the beneficiary designation right, because it's a simple little form, but you want to be sure that you've named the charity exactly as it should be named, and that you also provide for defaults in the event that you've selected a charity that might not qualify at the time of the end of your life. It's also important to check with your tax advisors, because there's been some movement in this area in terms of the tax-favored status of giving those kinds of benefits away to charity. Right now they're not as favored as they were in the past in terms of trying to take distributions or giving IRAs and things like that away to charity while you're alive. But the most important thing is get that beneficiary designation correct. It's very important with any sizable charitable gift to have a good gift agreement in place with the charity that you're working with. And it's important to have a dialogue with them in connection with putting that gift agreement together to find out what really works best in terms of the donor's objectives, but also the needs of the charity, and without trying to exercise too much control over the gift, because times can change, objectives can change, but at the same time you want to have some certainty that it's not going to go to a purpose that's completely different than what you intended. The other thing, though, too, that's important is that your family know what your objectives are, so that after you're gone, the people behind you can participate in the process of directing or helping to recommend how the monies are used. So that's a really important thing for the family head to be taking into account. The best way is a considered way that takes into account the objectives of the donor. Does the donor or somebody in the donor's family need an annuity or a payout for a while, but can afford to give to charity at the end of their life? That's a great candidate for a remainder trust. Then on the flip side, with the lead trust, where the charity's getting the money to start out with and then it goes back to family members, that could be a nice way to postpone distribution to family members, let them mature a little bit. Meanwhile, charity's getting their money. In today's low interest rate environment, those things happen to also work very well, and they can fulfill practical objectives, both to get money to charity now, get money to family later, and hopefully take advantage of the fact that the interest rates are low relative to how the trust might perform. It's very important that you have a conversation with the charity that you intend to benefit about how the bequest should be structured. As elementary things as getting their name right, which is something that a lot of people make errors about, but also seeing that you have a meeting of the minds in terms of how the bequest should be used, but keeping in mind the fact that the charity needs some flexibility in terms of your objectives. So you can define your objectives in a way that gives them some breathing room if something happens and the purpose that you want the money directed to has been fulfilled. An example I use a lot with my donors is the cure for polio. If you'd set aside sizable monies in 1940 to cure polio and in fact got cured, you want the charity that you gave that money to have some flexibility to be able to deal with it without having to go back into a courtroom and spend a lot of money that otherwise could be put to better purposes. Some people feel that they've had a lot of good fortune in their life to the extent that they're adequately provided for, their children are provided for beyond what they might have ever expected, and they just want to be benevolent because they feel that they've been very fortunate. Some people are particularly wedded to certain charities that they've had maybe a lifelong relationship with, that they know from the ground up do great work, and so that relationship can often be a prime motivator. Sometimes it's people who have plenty of money who like to see their names on buildings and to see themselves perpetuated after the end of their lives in terms of public recognition of their name and what they've done. It's kind of complicated what motivates people charitably, because it's a whole panoply of things that range from pretty selfish to completely benevolent.